Y estamos con Nash y toda en inglés. Thank you. So, your time.
Thank you.
Yes, should we give our picture? We can.
Cool. Well, welcome. What's the level of English in the room before I start going off in a language that people don't understand?
If this is zero, can you do a vote? Everything's okay. Okay, we have 5, 6, 8, 10. Okay.
So vamos a hacer un Spanglish de primera nivel, ¿vale?
Soy French.
And a bit of French, maybe a bit of Hindi. What's the level of Hindi in the room? Well, cool, welcome. It's great to be back. You know, I've been at LPCx once before, so it's great to be back this time in Madrid. And this time with my great friend and client, Julie from Billions. We want to talk to you guys about OKRs. I know probably you'll be very familiar with OKRs already. But we want to talk to you about what we've seen about how to unlock success with this tool. And we'll tell you more about that. So we want to talk to you about how to unleash the potential of the OKR methodology and also unleash the potential of the people working with the methodology. One of the things that we noticed is that there's a high rate of adoption in OKRs, especially among startups and PMAs, SMEs. A lot of companies, it's quite a popular topic. And what we've noticed is that a lot of times companies are adopting the methodology, and then maybe as much as 50 or 60% of those companies, 2 years down the line, are abandoning the tool. And it's kind of funny how you can find statistics online to prove basically any point that you want. But this statistic, about 50 to 60% of companies who are starting and abandoning it, is coming directly from sources that I trust very much, and it's also been our experience. So the question then comes is like, well, why? Why? Is there something wrong with the tool? Is the methodology not that good? Or is there an issue with the way in which we're deploying OKRs? And we obviously think that it's the second. And what I would like to say is I'm going to spare myself the embarrassment of explaining to you why I put this slide up here. Julie's talking me down from presenting this slide. But I've seen that a one-size-fits-all approach to OKRs, it just doesn't work. You go out there, you read Measure What Matters, you read Radical Focus, you read an ebook online, and then you try to implement the tool based on that. That's not really, potentially, that might not be the best way to go. And so the reason we're doing this together is because we wanted to talk you through an actual implementation of OKRs. So just really briefly about myself. So my name is Nash Billimoria. I'm the founder of a consultancy and accelerator called Remap. And Remap has a method. It's called the High Impact Culture Method. And I'll tell you what we don't do. We don't advise companies on what products they should produce or sell. We don't advise them on how to do their business or how to finance their business or how to market their business, because we assume that they're already experts in those areas. What we advise them on is how to become a high-performing organization, how to connect their strategy with their execution methodology, how to connect their strategy with their vision and their purpose, how to develop a leadership model that really makes sense for the type of business that they have, and basically how to build an organization that's both intelligent and highly healthy. We believe that those are the two ingredients that make for successful companies. And so one of the things that we've been working on with Bridge is around the OKR methodology, but I'll allow Julie to just introduce herself a little bit and Bridge for Billions.
Hola. Very happy to be here. It's very cozy. I was expecting more people, but I like it because it's more intimate.
Because it's summer.
Because it's summer,
yeah.
And it's jueves. So, yeah. people are out with the cervezas, but we have them for later, don't worry. And it's very necessary after speaking about OKRs. So my name is Julie, I'm French. I've been living here in Spain for the past 8 years. And I'm one of the co-founders with Pablo at the bottom of Virtual Billions. And this is our office, so welcome. And we've been in this office for the past 2 years. Yeah. And it's the first time we do an event here, so very exciting. And Bridge for Billions is a social enterprise, so if you would have a spectrum from an NGO to a normal company, we're somewhere in the middle. We are a for-profit social enterprise, so we want to be financially sustainable, but also we want to have a big impact in the world. And in our case, the impact that we want to have is creating an economy that meets the needs of everybody sustainably within the limits of the planet. And so that's really the long-term goal. And how we do that is we support early-stage entrepreneurs, all kinds of early-stage entrepreneurs all around the world, because we think entrepreneurship is a super powerful vehicle for creating value, creating employment, creating solutions to the biggest social and environmental challenges that we have nowadays. And so that's what we do. And we have a tech product that supports this mission, that is a platform for incubation programs. And we help entrepreneurs with a really structured journey to go through, in 6 months, the development of a business plan. And they also get connected with a mentor. A mentor can be any of you. They're basically volunteer professionals, like Nash, who's also one of our mentors, who meets with the entrepreneurs on Zoom an hour a week, roughly, and help them, have the emotional support, business support, and also be held accountable to building their businesses. And so that's what we do. The program is completely online. We've supported 5,000 entrepreneurs in those 8 years from 100 countries. We have it in many different languages, and we're not ready to stop. We have a very ambitious 10 years vision that we developed with Nash. Yeah. And we want to have supported 100,000 entrepreneurs in 10 years. So yeah, join us in the journey. We're hiring for lots of positions. We look for volunteer mentors, so this is the advertising moment.
Take advantage of it.
Yeah, we're a team of 50-something people now. Most of us based here in Madrid. We're 25 here in this office. There's another office in front. And then we have some teams in Latin America, especially in Guatemala, and then in Africa, especially in Rwanda. So yeah, that was the Julie moment.
Yeah. Very cool. So what we're going to do is we're just going to kind of just informally... Oh, actually, no. Before we get into this, I was going to ask you all a question. Obviously you know the dictionary definition of OKRs, objectives and key results. Everybody knows that. Well, I'm assuming that. Everyone knows that. But I really genuinely am curious to know, like, how would you describe OKRs? Actually, how many of you have worked with OKRs in the past? Okay, and how many of you are familiar with it? I should have asked this before. Kind of a little bit familiar? Okay, cool. So, based on whatever little information you know, there's absolutely no right or wrong answer to this. There is no dictionary definition of what it is and how it should work. But I'm genuinely curious to know, amongst yourselves, just have a little discussion with, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 people, and just discuss for a few moments, how would you describe what OKRs are all about? Okay? Just have a little conversation amongst yourselves. What do you think OKRs are about? And then share back and we can share a definition which we think is a useful starting point.
La idea es hablar con el vecino. Sí.
So just turn your chairs around and have a little conversation amongst yourselves.
Sí que estamos implementando por lo menos vamos a hacer un comunicado en la dirección
Hola, hola. This is the worst part of the job. I have to interrupt you. And I get the impression the conversation could have gone on for a bit longer, which actually speaks volumes already, right? It's just one tool with lots of different interpretations, right? So what were some of the things that you guys came up with? How would you describe OKRs?
You can say it in Spanish.
In Spanish,
Yeah.
in English, whatever you come to with.
Well, around here we were saying that the most common understanding of them, which doesn't mean that this is the correct way to see it, but it's like macro KPIs somehow. That's the general idea of how people usually at the beginning understand them. Yeah, and that well, I don't have no. But Pablo just was saying that you have been trying to understand them that way somehow for some years, and they didn't work.
Yeah.
So, and
We'll get onto that.
later became the spoilers.
Yeah, exactly. So anything else? How would you guys describe OKR just from your knowledge of it?
For me, it's to align the teams through one goal only,
Yeah.
instead of having different kind of ways to go somewhere and you don't know where to. It's always kind of one goal.
Yeah.
It's like a big backlog of the enterprise. Where do you want to go in the future, or in the short future? We were talking about you need a reference to get that objective in that backlog, and so much times there are a lot of confusion because someone in the office say, yeah, okay, and you start working without know what is that or.
Yes. Any other contributions on that?
I don't know if the OKRs need to be impacted from the top to the bottom. instead of the button to adopt, because you need to know how is the objective of the company. And sometimes your OKRs is from KPIs transforming in
OKRs.
You have your OKRs, over to have over OKRs, it's the what.
Yeah.
So I'd like to share a definition of OKRs with you. It's a bit long and it has many components to it. So I'm going to share the whole definition. Just take a moment to read it. And then Julie and I are going to just break down the definition and talk about why we think this is a sensible definition. Okay? The definition is this one. OKRs are a critical thinking framework to ensure team members work together, focusing their effort to make measurable contributions towards a purpose that energizes people and company. It's more like a paragraph and then yeah. There's a lot there, no? But this is the power and the potential of the tool, that it's a tool that can really help to create connections in many different ways across many different parts of the business. That's been our experience of it. So I'm going to break down what I think are basically 4 elements of this definition. The first one is a critical thinking framework. So for those of you that have worked with OKRs, you probably know that it all starts off with a series of questions. It starts off with a series of questions. For example, what is our most important objective now? Why this objective and not another objective? And just that one question alone can stimulate a very interesting conversation, because if you have 5 people around the table and different people are assuming that the most important objective of the business is one and somebody else thinks it's another, then having a misalignment on that one question can lead the business in many different directions. And on the opposite side of the coin is having alignment on the answer to that question can be very obviously aligning and can help you to then start making decisions which are consistent with that answer. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So it's about having challenging conversations. It's about a framework for asking the right questions so that we actually ask ourselves the right questions, have the right conversations, and then we can move forward in a kind of more united way. So there are many questions related to the OKR framework. I mentioned one of them. What is the single most important objective that we have as a business now? There'll be many other questions. For example, how might we measure success in this direction? What are the different projects, ideas, initiatives that we may pursue to achieve those outcomes? So it's a critical thinking framework. It allows us to start to work together and asking the right questions. And we think that's really, really powerful. The second part of the definition is about working together. And you mentioned about top-down and bottom-up. One of the beautiful things about OKRs, it's really a methodology that can allow the top-down and bottom-up and meet-in-the-middle approach to work very effectively. But again, I go back to what I said earlier on, is there's no one-size-fits-all way of doing it. There's no playbook that says you must do it this way, and that's what we're going to explore together. But one thing it does do is it starts to stimulate a conversation about objectives and key results that are not only departmental, but that could span across multiple departments. So if we're talking about improving customer experience, we're talking about the customer experience team, but we're also potentially talking about product. We're also potentially talking about sales. We're also potentially talking about operations. So it starts to bring in a much more cross-functional lens to the business, and it starts to raise the question is, okay, so what are the dependencies that I, let's say in customer, have on operations? What are the dependencies that operations has on sales? What is the dependency that sales has on finance? And those kind of conversations start to break down what often occurs as silos and starts having a much more collaborative conversation. So that's another reason why we think the methodology can be useful. Jules?
Yeah, the third pillar is measurable contributions. And it's an interesting one because I think it is key to OKRs that you decide on the most important thing and then you measure progress against this thing on a regular basis. But I think because we think OKRs are KPIs on steroids, I think that's what came up also in some of the definitions. Sometimes people, they only see this part of OKR, they only see, oh, it's a tool to measure. It's a tool to measure, and then we over-focus on the framework, we over-focus on the numbers, and we're not seeing all that's around it that Nash was sharing, like the critical thinking framework, the part about team members working together and making it pluridisciplinary or cross-functional in the company. So it is a tool that helps measure contributions, but it's not the only thing that it can do. And then it should be aimed towards a purpose that energizes people and the company. So this is super, super important, and actually I'm here because for the past year and a half we've been working with Nash at Bridge for Billions. He mentioned at the beginning I'm his client, on completely changing how we did OKRs. The previous way we did it was a disaster. I'm going to talk about it in a bit. And the way that we work with them now has been completely transformational for Bridge. And why it's been transformational, many, many reasons, but one of them is this connection with the purpose. So we really saw clearly the map of like, the company has a purpose, we want to exist to achieve something in the world. And then you may have below the purpose, you know, a long-term vision, a short-term vision, and OKRs are a tool that helps you advance towards those visions.
Yeah, that's great. It's not a substitute for strategy, right? It's about how do we achieve our vision, our strategy, our goals. So we'll talk more about that. So, let's check. You know, I think of OKRs like a tool. It's a tool, right? Like, tools have been around for, well, forever really. And they've allowed us to make progress as a species, within companies, within homes, in so many different ways. We use tools. And those tools unlock potential for us. But the thing with a tool is that it has to be used in the way that in the right way, and then it will achieve whatever it is that we want to achieve. A very simple example would be like, imagine you have a leaking sink in your house, and somebody gives you the spanner, right?
What's the spanner?
¿Cómo se dice? El ¿cómo? Este. And somebody gives you the tool to fix it, but you use the tool and you start turning it in the wrong direction. Then the leak gets worse.
Or you just, you know.
Or you start tapping it because you don't understand that it's a spanner and you use it in the wrong way. That doesn't solve the problem. And then what do people do? They put the tool on the side and say, oh, this tool is no good. Well, maybe. Or maybe we weren't using the tool really in the right way, and maybe we needed to learn a bit more about how to use the tool. And so that brings me on to this topic, which we call deployment parameters. It sounds like a really fancy word, but really it's just saying, how do we plan to roll out OKRs in our company? Let's be conscious about how we choose to do it, because there's no one size fits all, there's no one solution to doing it. Like, Google used OKRs, or uses them, and so does Bridge for Billions. Like, what do they have in common? Not that much.
We rock.
Yeah, you absolutely rock. But, well, anyways, I won't say anything else about Google. But you get my point, like, you're not going to deploy the tool in the same way at Google as you would at Bridge for Billions. It just wouldn't make sense. It's a company of 50 people, it's in the entrepreneurship ecosystem, it's a completely different business in a different stage. So deployment parameters are basically a set of choices that you can make as to how you plan to roll out the tool in your company. Okay? So over to Julie. So this is where I go to interview mode. Julie, hi.
Hi.
Where were Bridge for Billions at the time when we decided to redeploy OKRs?
At the bottom of the pole.
At the bottom of the hall. Tell us about that.
No, not really, but we had been using OKRs for 2 years, 3 years probably, and we tried so many different things and it still didn't work. And it's funny because every time we did a new cycle, we're like, now we got it, now it works, but then it didn't. And I think, honestly, if we hadn't put some intentional thinking, thanks to Nash, as to how to implement them and how can this work for us, we would have stopped using them. And we would be in the 60% of those companies that stop after 2 years. A bit more persistent, but not much more. So at that time, should I go into how we would do them, or we do that right after?
Yeah, I mean, so Bridge had been using OKRs for 2 years, you were struggling with them.
Yeah.
And
Maybe I can share some of the pain points we had.
yeah, go for it.
So what was really difficult is that, first of all, we took a really, really long time in defining them. And as you know, I mean, you can have OKRs for 1 year, you can have them for 3 months, for 1 quarter, you can have them for any, chunk of time that you decide. But basically, if we were to define, let's say, for a year, or for 6 months, or for 3 months, it would take us 1 to 2, 3 months to agree on the OKRs. And actually, time had already passed, and we were already feeling late and feeling this sense of like failure and urgency towards reaching something when time already had started to pass. So that was a huge pain point for us, how long it would take us to define them. Also, we didn't really know who to involve. We were at the time of using them maybe a company of 25, 30 people, and we had a more or less defined small leadership team of 5 people, and we didn't know, do we just do it ourselves, do we involve more people? So that was an issue also, and it would create tension.
How many OKRs did you have?
Oh, we had so many, that was an issue. So we went, like, when we get passionate about something, we go all in. So like, we read everything online about OKRs, we looked at the TED Talks, at the videos, at the whatever, and then we thought, okay, so there are 3 levels. There are the strategic, tactical, and operational OKRs. And the strategic are for the whole company. And then each department should have their own, and then Julie, each person should have their own OKRs of what they should achieve. And so we started defining it for the company, for the department, for the people, and like, it was so much at once, and we didn't realize that we were cannibalizing resources, because if marketing wants to go from 1 to 100 in 1 year, and then sales wants to go from 10 to 100, and then another department, and then we have the company one, we're just all trying to achieve huge things without coordinating, without realizing that we need to do it together. It's not that we are in silos and each team works independently, we have interactions.
I remember auditing their OKRs. We did an audit, and I was like, oh my god.
And we were so proud.
There was almost more OKRs than there were people. It was like, oh my god.
Yeah.
So, that
And also the number of...
be a challenge.
So as you may know, in OKRs there is the O and there are the KRs. So the objective is, I want to feel beautiful, and the KR is the go, is, what would it be?
What would be the key result?
The key result would be...
Go to help yourself at times.
No, it wouldn't be that.
No, because that's the initiative. I didn't want to say lose 2 kilos because I don't want to make you quite lost. But that would be a KR, for example.
People around me are saying, like
80% of people I think say on this.
say your which is already the case.
Exactly. So you have your objective and you have your measurable KR. And so in our case, we had maybe 2 to 3 company objectives, but then attached to each objective we had probably 6 to 8 KRs. Because actually we were using them as KPIs, and we were using them as a replacement for data that we didn't track at the time, for like making sure that we're going to check the finances, making sure we're going to check if the product roadmap is on track. So we were just mixing a lot of things at the same time, and we didn't understand that OKR are driving transformation for the business, and that's what it does.
So then I audited their OKRs, and I had a little bit of a minor stroke. And then I asked the leadership team, and I said to them, look, let's sit down and let's really ask ourselves the question, why do we want to use OKRs at Bridge? And they were like, oh, we've been using it for 2 years. I was like, no, let's stop and really ask the question, why do we want to use OKRs at Bridge? What do we hope to get out of it? Are we all on the same page about that answer? And you don't need to read the details, and I put it especially in a small font because it's just their own personal answer to the question. But basically, we stopped and asked the question, what do you hope to gain? What do you hope to achieve? And what are the opportunities that you wish to capitalize on by using this tool? And they categorized their answers in these different areas. There was 5 areas that came up. One was around motivation and inspiration. One was about measurability of success, having a clearer sense of direction, working, like growing as a team, as a company, and working in a collaborative way.
And then overcoming some pains.
And then overcoming some pains. Mm. So what did that process of answering that question enable you to do?
Well, first I wanted to use the tool again because it gave me a perspective of like all those things that I want to achieve. Maybe it can help, so maybe it doesn't suck that much. And also just thinking why you want to use them is the first step in using them right. If you don't know that your thinking is leaking, then you're not going to take this tool and use the right tool to repair it. So we wanted to know what is not working that we mapped, and also what are the possibilities, what are the opportunities, what could be working much better. And we saw that actually, like, to get motivated, people want to be inspired, people want to have a common goal, they want to feel that they are learning in the journey, they're growing, and all those things were the why for us. But I think this why is going to be different, company per company, team per team, depending on the sector, the stage of maturity, the people. So I'm not saying by that everyone should use OKR with that intention, but that was ours.
Yeah. Just not answering just the first answer that comes to your mind, like, oh, alignment, or growth, or having a North Star, or whatever, but really scratching below the surface. It's like, no, why are we, listen, Julie and Pablo will testify that it's an effort. Any one of you who's worked with OKRs will know it's an effort, it's an investment of time and people's energy, right? So you want to be really clear about what do we want as a return from that investment of time and energy, right? And so
this is very similar than like the blue ocean strategy for me. It's like surface.
yeah,
To align to look for what is the real important that we need to get, and
yeah,
it's more deep than the real numbers.
exactly. And often what happens is people read a book and they say, okay, we're going to do it because it's going to help us grow faster, or because we're going to align our strategy, and then you end up exactly, and then you end up with so many OKRs. And you're not actually achieving that objective because it wasn't really your idea. So you've got to come up with your own idea as to why you want to invest the time. And then, leading on from that, so at the end of this presentation, I'm going to share with you what I think are basically 6 stages of how you might think about going about deploying an OKR program. So if it doesn't all make sense as we're going through, don't worry about it. I'll try and recap it all at the end. Okay? So Julie is going to talk you through. So there's 10 deployment parameters. These deployment parameters are basically questions that you should answer for yourself as to how you plan to use OKRs in your company. So I provided them with an audit. We looked at the old process. We audited the old process. What were the pains? What was working, what was not working. We then stopped and asked ourselves a question, why do we really want to deploy OKRs and what do we want to gain from it? And then we went through this list of 10 questions and I advised them on what I thought would make sense for their company, but ultimately they decided how they wanted to deploy the tool. So we thought we would share their answers to those 10 questions. Just to be clear, we're not advocating that you choose the same answers. Right? We're just sharing with you one client's journey through those 10 questions. Is that cool? Making sense?
How's the English also? Yeah?
Okay, so Jules, the first question that we asked was, at what level do we set OKRs?
Yes, and by what level we mean, do we only have OKRs for the company overall? Do we have them for the company, for the departments, the different teams? Or do we have it for the company, the departments, and the people? And maybe there are more nuances that I'm losing on. And so at the time, as I mentioned, we were doing it at all levels of the organization. Individual, more or less, but mostly at the company level and also at the department level. And at that time, we decided, okay, let's just do it for the company. We're a team of 40 people maybe at the time. And we said, okay, we need to prioritize resources at that stage, so let's just have a few OKRs that are the same for the whole company.
And just to be clear, I think what I suggested to them was they should have a maximum of 2 objectives with a maximum of 2 key results per objective.
Yeah, that's the next one.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No problem. And then we started negotiating and we got 3 KRs per objective. We were used to having a lot of key results per objective, so for us it was hard to transition. So we decided, okay, let's have maximum 2 company objectives and then 3 key results per objective. And actually we already evolved. This was 1 year ago. For the past year we had only 1 objective as a company, only 1. I can share later if you're interested which one. And then we had up to 5 key results, 5 of them, but for 1 objective only. So we already changed those parameters from when we defined to now.
Yeah, this is a year ago. And we don't have to spend a ton of time on it with the internal and external. Can you say anything about that?
What does it mean, internal, external?
The internal focused objective and the external focused.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, we won't spend a lot of time, but basically there could be objectives that are about, like, you know, your market share, getting more clients, making more revenue, so like more the external facing, yeah, customer experience. And you could also have OKRs that are for internal, like, I would like that 80% of the people here say it's a great place to work, those kind of things. So we try to keep in mind like having internal OKRs and external OKRs.
Right. And what did you decide about the length of your cycle?
Okay, that's an interesting one. And we're still changing it, but pretty much we have 2 cycles in the year of 6 months each. And so we fix the objective for 1 year. After 6 months, we sit and we ask ourselves, is it still relevant? Do we want to keep it or do we want to revisit it? Last year we kept it. We felt, okay, we need 6 more months. And the key results, we set them for 3 months. And for me, that was something that was really a learning with Nash because I didn't know it was possible. It's like, you can have an objective for 6 months, let's say, but then your key result is for 3. And then you check in the middle and you decide to change your key result or to keep it. And for me, that was really interesting because I think I was talking right before the chat with Noemi, who's been using OKRs in her company. And sometimes it's so hard to measure that midway through the cycle, your key result is irrelevant. It's old. You don't care about it. It's obsolete. You don't care about it anymore. But your objective is still vibrant. It's still alive. Like my objective is to be a company that does X. But then how you measure that is not relevant anymore. So that gave me a joker card, a comodine, of like, okay, maybe we can keep the same objective but revisit the KR midway.
I just wondered, do you guys have questions? Is there some stuff that we're saying that's not making sense, or should we just keep going with this? I just wanted to check in with everyone.
What's going on if you have 3 objectives?
I'm sorry?
You say no more than 2 objectives, right?
In our case.
But it's not a blanket rule. I'm not saying that that's the rule. I'm just saying, based on the answers that they gave from the question why OKRs and the audit that we did and the problems that they were facing, we knew that we needed to dramatically reduce the amount of OKRs and have it be much more focused. And we felt that that was a constraint that would stimulate the right kind of thinking. So having only two objectives was like, oh, that's a challenge. So we would like to do 4 things, but we're only committing to 2. So it forced a conversation.
Okay.
So then it says, how do we score OKRs? We haven't actually.
Yeah, we haven't used it so much.
But
this question is about, do you put something very, very unattainable, almost inspirational, or do you put something that you actually commit to? And the answer will really depend based on what is your need behind, what do you want to achieve. It can be very demotivating to put one that is inspirational that you never reach for some teams. For other teams, maybe it's very motivating if you reach 10%. So
yeah, and if you read different books on the topic, for example, Measure What Matters talks about committable key results and aspirational key results, where the committable ones are the ones that you're expecting to deliver 100%, and the aspirational ones, well, if you get to 70%, that's considered success. Then you read Radical Focus, which is another book, very popular, and Christina talks about setting the OKRs at a 50% confidence interval. So you define your key results at 50% confidence that we can achieve it or not achieve it. And then Ben, in his book, Ben Lamore, who's the founder of OKRs.com and somebody who's been very influential for us, he defines 3 potential levels of key results: stretch, target, and commit. So a stretch is like, we have just a 10% chance of achieving this. A target is a 50-50% chance of achieving this, and a commit is a 10% chance of achieving it. And so I'm not saying you have to follow any of these methods, but I'm saying you should be clear when you set out on your OKR journey is how aspirational do we intend our key results to be. Everyone should be on the same page about that.
exactly. And like to say it in other words, the team should know, is it that the company will die if we don't achieve it? Or is it that we're good, but this would be great?
Yeah. So there has to be a conversation about that. Or we recommend that there is a conversation about that. Oftentimes there isn't, and then these kind of things cause problems and pains later on. You know, if somebody in their mind thinks that 70% is success, and they're celebrating a 70% achievement of a key result, and then somebody else is thinking, oh, we missed it by 30%, it's failure. You know, that's just in people's minds. We need to have that alignment conversation up front to really be clear on at what level of stretch are we setting our key results. Okay, next deployment parameter. How and where do we publish and share our OKRs?
So that's an interesting one because we started with lots of limiting beliefs, I would say. One was that it takes a really long time to define them, and spoiler alert, it doesn't. Like, I remember being in this room, the first day we got this office, it was about 1 year ago, because we got bigger and we needed a second office. We were in that room, it was completely empty with Nash and 3 other people. And in half a day, probably, and maybe the exact moment, in 1 hour, we defined what was the one objective for the company for 1 year. And before we thought, okay, we need to analyze so many things, we need to do reports, department per department, we need so many metrics, and we actually realized that no, it takes like sitting 5 people together, putting our minds to the same thing, being, you know, good with yourself in that moment with your mind, and then discussing and doing it. So I think the how and where do we publish and share them, we got challenged on how complicated it is versus how easy it can be with the right conditions. And then in terms of sharing, a huge learning that we've had with Nash, not just with OKR, but with like business in general, is that because of our culture, our leadership model that is very horizontal, we thought, okay, we need to involve everybody in the company. And if we don't, they're going to hate us. That was a belief we had, no? And we realized actually it's okay for a smaller group to define them, as long as you're super transparent with the process, you explain to people who, why, how. And then when you share the final results, you don't just share where you got, but you share the story of it, the whole thinking process of like, we thought about this, but then we thought this is too ambitious, and then we thought about that, and we thought we don't have enough resources today, and then someone had an idea, and when they proposed the idea, we all looked at him and were like, yeah, that's the thing, and then we kept refining the statement, and this is how we got our O. And when you tell that to people, they can follow the mental journey of getting there, and they're much more likely to say, wow, yeah, I agree with it, and just have a clarifying question, instead of, wait, but how did you get there? Like, why is this objective? I don't understand. So for us, this was huge, the sharing part.
Yeah, we've learned both ways, haven't we? By doing it right and also right.
Totally.
Yeah.
And we still do it wrong sometimes.
Cool, so just to keep moving, how do we drive forward and track our OKRs?
Should I share?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, so what we realized is that we didn't have, in the previous way we did them, which was wrong, we didn't have anyone responsible for each KR. There wasn't one person or a group of people that were like, this is my thing in the company, I'm driving this forward. And that was transformational when we realized, okay, we need people or teams in charge of each KR. And so that is what Nash calls a squad. So we started creating squads that are what he calls cross-functional from different teams. So maybe you have a KR.
Can I jump in?
Yeah.
Just by definition, a company level OKR, by definition, is cross-functional, right? If it's not cross-functional, then it's not really a company level priority. So because we were setting objectives at the company level, it didn't make sense to then just have, you know, operations or finance or whoever working to achieve that. So that wouldn't be cross-functional. That wouldn't be actually company level. Sorry, so back to you.
No, perfect. And so for example, last year our objective was, for 1 year, make our business and impact model financially balanced and human balanced. So, you know, it sounds maybe big and abstract, but for us it made sense because at the time we were not able to deliver our service in a way that we were secure, was financially viable, and was people viable, meaning people are not in a burnout, they're not, you know, they're thriving at work, or most of them are thriving at work. So that was our objective for the past year. And there are many aspects to it. So one KR, for example, in the financially balanced way, was secure 2 more clients in this sector to reduce dependency from these other clients that we have, that if they stop signing, we would have been in a complicated situation. And so for this KR of reduce dependency on those 2 clients and find new clients, we had a team of people, some for product, some from sales, some from marketing, some from operations, that would sit together once a week And once a week they would be like, okay, this is our goal, what do we do? What conversations do we need to have? What people do we need to work with outside of the squad? And so this was really important for us, like we need a group to drive it forward and track it. And this group of people is not responsible to achieve the KR, they're responsible to drive it forward. So they need to call other people in the company, communicate with other people and be like, hey, what do we do about the new clients thing? Otherwise we're going to have problems. But they don't have themselves to find the new client necessarily.
And they also raise the flag if they're off track. If the key result starts dropping in confidence, then it would be on them to be like, hey, you know, there's an issue here, we need to raise this up. It's a company level priority, so we need to put focus and attention there. The relationship of OKRs and performance reviews.
So we decided in our deployment parameters that we didn't want to connect OKRs with performance reviews of people. We have other tools to assess performance, to have growth. Maybe another day we do another charla, other accountabilities. But so for us, OKRs have nothing to do with people's performance. So we're not gonna, have a conversation with someone of like, oh, you're underachieving in your role because this KR is not on track. They are separate things.
Yeah. Generally, we think that's good practice. Just a little bit on the relationship between OKRs and other KPIs that you might have.
So OKRs are not KPIs with steroids. Therefore, we have KPIs and we have OKRs. And the KPIs are how much revenue do we make, how many new clients did we sign, what's the well-being level of the team. Like we have a number of KPIs. And KPIs, they are measures of how we are doing in our business as usual. And OKRs are a measure of how much are we driving change. So they're two different things for us.
That's a really, really important point. I think a lot of times companies set off with the idea that the OKRs are going to be used to manage their business as usual, their day-to-day, and then they end up with loads and loads of OKRs. They're just better. There are other better tools out there for managing your BAU, your business as usual. And we really try to encourage companies who are using OKRs to focus them in where they want to create transformation. Where do they want to grow 3x, 5x, 10x, and define their OKRs only in those aspects. And use other tools and other KPIs and other disciplines to manage the day-to-day. How do we ensure different levels of OKRs align?
We didn't have to solve this one because we have only one level, company level. But we do make sure at the beginning of the cycle that we don't cannibalize resources too much. So we try to ensure that one person is not in 2 or 3 squads, that it's not gonna, like squad 1 requires that much money, but then squad 2 requires that much money and we only have that much money. So we check resources, but we don't have to deal with the different levels thing, maybe in a few years.
Maybe even sooner, who knows. So how did you manage the relationship between the OKRs coming from the top, from the leadership team, and then having that deep buy-in and engagement from the rest of the team?
So that's a tough one. I think we still need to do more work on that now.
Yeah.
But
how did we do it in the first iteration, like in the first experiment that we had?
Mostly top down, no?
So what we did was the leadership team worked on drafting the company level OKRs, but they were in draft format and they weren't finalized. There was an all hands meeting. It was actually a retreat, but it could be done in an all hands meeting, whereby there was this storytelling approach to explain, in fact, what came before the OKRs was the one-year vision. So the company had really clear what their vision was for the year. They then drafted a set of objectives and key results that was related to that vision. They then did a storytelling approach with the rest of the company explaining what is the process we followed, what were the highs and lows, what did we learn, how did we arrive at this draft. There was an opportunity for everybody to ask clarifying questions about the key results that were being presented. And then people were organized into cross-functional groups to come up with possible initiatives that could be chosen to drive those key results. I don't know if this makes sense to you. Are you guys familiar with what I mean by initiatives? It's basically a key result is an outcome. It's a result. It's not, I'm going to go to the hairdresser 10 times. It's, I want 8 out of 10 people to say I'm beautiful. Right? It's the result. So in order to get to that result, maybe she has to go to the hairdresser, maybe she wants to, I don't know, I don't want to make this up. This could be very dangerous territory. But you get my point. Like blue shirt. So there's activities that you could choose to achieve the outcome. Those could be called initiatives. And then the KR is the outcome, is where we wish to get. Right? So the teams basically came up with a set of possible initiatives that they thought could drive that key result. So this is where there was participation from the team. And then there was the formation of the squads. So people had to self-select and say, okay, I think I could participate in this squad. The leadership team already had an idea of who they thought should be in the squads. And there was a collaboration to decide on...
Especially for the first time, because for us it was the first time we were doing those cross-functional teams, someone from marketing, someone from product and sales. So we proposed one person from each team to join. And then mostly they had to say, yes, I accept, or no, I don't.
Okay. So, without going into more detail than that, these were Bridges' answers to those 10 questions. So, do you want to talk a bit more about the squads? How are we doing on time? Sorry. We started at...
It's your own headquarters, so you want to be more time, and the people is comfortable with that.
Well, I want to give people space for questions and stuff.
Yeah, I think I explained a bit about the squad already.
You did already,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So,
I mean, the main problem is when we are usually doing this meetup, we have some closing time
Yeah,
of the
well,
event. So if you want us to be at midnight, we can be here.
we might be just the two of us at midnight,
Yeah,
that's the problem.
Or maybe the people want to be more time.
So, okay, we're not going to take up way more time talking to you because we'd love to hear your questions and have more of an informal discussion. We're only a small group. But maybe Julia and I can just talk you through what it looked like in practice. So this is the life cycle of an OKR, of OKRs, right? So you set the OKRs. We talked already a little bit about the definition process that we chose. Then there's the checking in. Then there's a review to make sure that we're in the right spot. And then there's a reflection process to see what have we learned from the last cycle. And then we go back to setting it. It's very simple, it just kind of goes through that loop. So hopefully you guys are fairly clear on how we went about setting it. I mentioned the drafting and the team participating in the initiatives and the formation of the squads. So do you want to talk a little bit about the weekly check-ins and what they look like?
Very briefly. So there are 2 check-ins we would do every week, or that we still do. One is that each squad has their meeting, and they speak about, okay, what do we do? Is it working? Is it not working? What initiatives? They have this conversation. So imagine we have 4 squads, there are those 4 meetings happening and different people going to each. And then we have another check-in, which is, we call it the general meeting. We have a meeting once a week. It's the only hour in the week that everyone at Bridge is together on Zoom. And so in that meeting, each squad would say, what are their progress this week? So this also fosters a sense of accountability to the rest of the company, like, okay, KR1, we're doing great, KR2, we're late, KR3, we need some help. So everyone would just announce where they are.
Mm-hmm. And then, did we do the mid-cycle?
And then the mid-cycle review, we did it twice
Yeah.
for the 2 first cycles. So basically, helped by Nash, who came to facilitate, we had a moment with all the people in all the squads to be like, okay, how is it working, those deployment parameters for us? Are we advancing with the KRs? What are we learning? There was a big focus on learning because it was the first time we did it that way. So, you know, we had lots of learnings. For example, at the beginning, the first squads, they thought they had to do all the work. So they defined all the list of tasks and then they started doing and then they felt overwhelmed, they had too much work. So one of the first learning was, we're not doing, we're driving. What does it mean to drive? Oh, it means that we need to define the task, but then we need to find the right people so that they help us deliver. And there were many, many other learnings, but this mid-cycle review was a moment to pause, breathe, and see what we have learned.
And then the reflection?
And then reflect is basically at the end of the cycle, checking how far have we come with each KR, and then KR by KR, ask ourselves, do we want to change it, keep it?
Keep, modify, remove.
Keep, modify, or remove. Do we want to keep this KR for the next cycle because we haven't gone fast enough or further enough? Do we want to remove because we achieved it, it's irrelevant, or the business has changed, it's irrelevant? Or do we want to modify? So
maybe you want to keep the key
kind
result.
of keep it, but not really.
Maybe you keep the key result, the wording, but maybe the metrics in the key results change.
Maybe before it was 80% of something, and now, okay, 50 because 80 was too ambitious.
Or the other way around.
Yeah.
And then we go back through the cycle again. Cool? So,
The cycle, how many times it takes?
it depends. That's one of the deployment parameters, right? So you have to choose. Julie was talking that they chose 6 month objectives and then 3 monthly KRs. So the cycle would correspond to the 3 month cycle.
Yeah.
And then it's really related to the movement.
Yeah. It doesn't necessarily take long, necessarily, because a lot of times you might keep those key results or modify the key results, but essentially they stay the same. So it's not always a long process. It's not always starting from scratch, is what I'm saying. So I wanted to kind of summarize everything that we're talking about into just one slide, which we could consider 6 steps to making OKRs work for you. And this is just based on our experience, our learning, and what we think could be useful for you as you think about either deploying or redeploying within your companies. So the first step is to ask why. And I put 4 questions here. Why are we deploying OKRs or redeploying OKRs? In their case, it was redeploying. What pains do we want to overcome? What opportunities do we hope to gain? And really, are we aligned as a team in our answers to those questions? And I think you'll find that the 45 minutes or an hour that you spend answering this question will yield a lot of value for you. And many times we just jump into the execution, but we miss the fundamental steps before, and then we're very scattered. And we do that in the name of efficiency, which is ironic, because it ends up being inefficient, because we're starting off with very different ideas.
That's one thing I learned with Nash. He calls it slow down to speed up. It's a thing.
Well, think about this. If you're, I don't know if you've ever watched cars on a racetrack or motorbikes or anything like that, Formula 1 for example. What you find is that the fastest drivers, they slow down sufficiently before the bend so that they can carry their speed through the bend. The fastest drivers are not the ones who are pushing the accelerator the hardest. The ones are knowing when to slow down so that they can speed up. They have the fastest lap time. So it's about knowing when to accelerate and when to brake. And sometimes we go for this idea of efficiency, but actually we end up being super inefficient because we're not asking ourselves the right questions. And that's what the tool is for. It's designed to help you to step back and step out from the business and look at it in a more objective way and ask yourself the questions that are really going to make the difference to the execution side. So that you're either on the business up here thinking about big picture questions like, what's our objective, how are we going to measure success, etc. Or you're in the business and then you're executing. That's when you need to be efficient. So you want to be able to do both things. So we really advise that you spend the requisite amount of time, the right amount of time with the question up front. It's not a difficult, complex question. It can yield really important answers. Then, we're going to give you, in the next slide, a list of the 10 questions. And you don't have to answer them all. Maybe you want to ask 11th question or 12th question. No pasa nada. But we want you to think through, how do we, in our company, in this moment, we want you to be intentional about how you're choosing to deploy the tool. So go through the questions. Are those the right questions for you? Do you want to change those questions? Do you want to add them? No problem. But think through the answers to those questions.
And maybe one thing there, sometimes it's very daunting because you don't know the answer. You don't know if you want a 3-month cycle or a 6-month cycle. So at the end, it's just trial and error. We decided 6 months because we had tried 3, and we thought that it takes a bit of time for the squads to get into the zone, and then it was already over. So I think it's just a matter of testing also.
Absolutely. And you want the answers to those questions to be related to the answer to the first question, which is why are we doing it. So choose the deployment parameters that best suit the answer to why we want to do it. If you want to gain in speed, and then you want to have, if your answer is you want to get faster, but then you have 25 different key results, then maybe you'd be like, well, is this really the best way to go faster? Do you know what I mean? That's not the best example, but you get my point. I said to Bridge, to all of them, I said, look, let's take the attitude of crawl, then walk, then run. First you have to crawl, then you walk, and then you run. If you go straight for running, you get hurt. Right? So crawl first. What does crawling mean? Well, choose a small number of OKRs to start with. Make that, give yourself a constraint in the beginning. And go slow, go small. Just choose one level. Don't try and do it across the board. Choose a pilot. Okay, we want to deploy it in this particular part of our business. Whatever crawl means to you. Crawl, walk, run. Then remember the OKR fundamentals. Less is more. I just talked about that. You know, OKRs are for transformation. We also talked about that. There's a difference between running your business and making change happen. And if you mix the two things, then the change doesn't really happen. Right? You want to be really focused and say, okay, you know, a good question to ask yourself is, how much time, effort, and energy do we want to commit to transformational projects? As a company, as a team? Is it 10% of our time? Because we're really just interested in maintaining the business? Is that the moment we're in? If you're just really interested in the status quo, then maybe you don't need OKRs right now. But maybe if you really realize that actually there's some areas of the business that COC we need to transform, and we want to commit 40% of our time to that, then you want to develop the corresponding amount of OKRs related to that question. Right? So OKRs for transformation. OKRs are not everything. We talked about that with the KPIs thing. Right? Bridge also has a scorecard, a set of health metrics that tells them if their business is healthy or not. Right? So OKRs is not about keeping the lights on. It's about transformation. So, and then really encourage people to focus about outcomes over outputs. I don't know if you know what I mean by this. That key results are results, not activity. It's not build a new website. It's what do you achieve, what do you hope to gain by building a new website? You want to attract X number of visitors. Okay, why do you want to do that? How's that going to help the business? So you keep asking the why until you get to an outcome. What is the outcome that we wish? And they defined, you know, we want to achieve our, deliver our business and impact models in a financially viable way. And then they put a key result, they define what does that mean? So the key result explains the objective. This is what we mean by the objective. Okay? So just keep in mind those fundamentals. You may or may not want to experiment with the squad model, it's not something you have to do. But we encourage you to think about being cross-functional and not just having departmental OKRs. Like, what are the dependencies to achieve a given key result? So the squads at Bridge were built around the key result. Each key result has a squad, and the squad lasts for as long as the key result lasts, and is made up of 4 or 5 people who, from different parts of the business, where there's dependency to achieve that outcome. So have a think about if that might make sense for you. Number 5. Yeah, please.
Yeah, it's funny because now that I think about it, we barely measure them at the end of the cycle, the OKRs. Like, it's gonna sound bad, but the thing is that the squad is working on it, and we know that we see the work happening, and we see the transformation happening, and we were so focused on the number in the previous way we were doing it, and now sometimes we don't even know what's the exact percentage we have achieved, but we just see that the results have happened. So it's a completely different approach to like working with this tool. And focus on learning, I can continue on this one, if that's okay? Yeah. Because the fact that you create a squad that is cross-functional, or not cross-functional even, you're gonna have people that are a little bit more junior, a little bit, and that's a learning experience for everyone, literally, but maybe even more for them, because they've been in their business as usual, they've never been thinking about what we want to do as a company, they've never been working with someone from that department, so it's really a learning journey for people getting involved in the squads, and it's very motivating because we're like, people, this is what drives transformation at Bridge for Billion, and they're like, yeah, I'm part of this transformation, I want 80% of the team member to thrive, and that's my goal. Okay, what does it mean thrive, and what can we do so people feel better? Like, so they're really, really week after week thinking about this, and they feel that they contribute to something bigger, and that's really what has been the biggest transformation for us.
I have a question. In these squads that are cross-functional, who is leading this thing? Because you have someone from marketing, whatever.
So you need to have one person.
Yeah, because I have this experience in one environment to.
So it's not per department, but each squad has a champion.
Yeah, each squad has one person who's the facilitator, the leader of the squad.
Because it's difficult, because if there are some two persons that are not agreeing on something else, like I've got this experience, I didn't agree on what they wanted to do, but at the end of the day, the one which is winning is the one, maybe not the one which is the right, it's more the one which is having the higher voice. And I don't know, that's why it's also good to kind of define
I think this has more to do with like conflict resolution systems, because the facilitator or the OKR champion, as Nash calls it, is not necessarily the person who has the last word in this model, or at least in our deployment parameters, but it's the person who like facilitates the meeting, holds accountable people, reminder, tomorrow we have our squad meeting, think about what we have achieved, what we haven't achieved, and like they facilitate the conversation, they distribute the word a little bit if someone takes too much space. So it's not necessarily the end decision maker, but I think that's maybe a good question to add to the 12 questions. When it comes to that, who's the end decision maker? Is it the person in the squad that's in the leadership team, even if they're not the OKR champion? Is it not? So having an intentional answer to that as well.
We just find it way more motivating when people focus on the learning, because there's always learning happening. You know, if you're paying attention to it, there's so much to learn about. Whereas what often happens is we just celebrate the results, and then if you don't achieve the result, then it's a failure. Whereas if you're focusing on the learning, and you're celebrating the learning, that means you're growing, right? And so we try to emphasize learning over execution. We try to say, look, constantly focus on what is it that you're learning, because if you're learning something, then you can apply that to how you work, you grow, you get better, that improves your results, as opposed to just focusing on the end result, and then you're either failed or succeeded. We want people, you know, you've heard it before, it's a marathon and not a sprint, right? So we need to keep our energy high, we need to keep motivated, we need to feel like this is a race that we want to keep running. And so we need recognition, we need to feel like we're learning stuff. And we want to celebrate that learning. So don't only look for the result to celebrate. What is the learning that we're having? How can we celebrate that? And then lastly, reflect and reset. So, you know, we ask the questions, did you achieve, partially achieve, or not achieve your key results? What have you learned about the process? Do you want to keep, modify, or defer these key results for the next cycle? And again, you know, focus on the learning. Learning about the key results themselves and about how you work to achieve those key results, and then apply those lessons to the next part of the cycle, which is back to the beginning again. And that's pretty much it. Like, we think if you follow these principles, we're not trying to tell you what to do. We're just trying to help you to think through in a certain way that will allow you to decide what you want to do that makes sense for you as a company. And we feel that will set you up for success in the model.
Yeah. Or as a team, because I understand we're a rather small company. I've heard some people have companies of hundreds or 500s of people. So maybe this is something you can use in your team if you have this possibility.
Cool. Well, we've written out the deployment parameters, so you have them there. You can have the slide pack, of course. You have the 6 steps, and we'd love to take any questions.
I have a question. I am not a product manager, actually.
I'm also not a product manager.
Okay, that's nice to know, because I don't know in this, and what we're talking about, in my mind, when you say that QR, an external QR, I was thinking, okay, if you have an external QR, how to measure that? And not to identifying or not trying to use KPIs to do those kind of things, because if I'm not know if I'm wrong, right? But an external PR depends from business, another business, marketing. I don't know, but how to measure or how to identify if the external PR weren't involved with KPIs from business. I don't know if you can understand me.
I think I got some of it, but
okay. What is the difference between an external PR and a business KPI?
So Nash will complement. Maybe you have a different vision, but I think what is an OKR at a given moment can be a KPI at another. It's just that because OKRs drive transformation, maybe at some point in your business life, it is transformational to have 80% of our clients that rate 5 out of 5. And at other times, it's just business as usual. Like they've always been rating 5 out of 5, so you need to maintain it. But when you create it, you start from 3 out of 5, so it's really big.
Exactly. I was going to say the same thing. It's like you want to reduce your customer acquisition cost from, I don't know, I'm just making up numbers here, from 60 to 20, right? So because it's a big leap, right? You want to go from 60 to 20. That's a huge change.
You need to look inside because you're going to have to change some things for that to happen.
Absolutely, right? You're going to have to make transformation happen. So in that case, that could be a key result. But then let's say you get to 20, and now you want to maintain it at 20. Then it would just be a performance, a KPI that you monitor on the side just to make sure that you're
But then
staying.
you don't have a squad necessarily working on it, you just
It's
have
not a key
people
result
measuring.
anymore.
Of course.
So key results can absolutely have KPIs or be KPIs. It's just that it's much more than a KPI, and it's focused in creating performance change.
Amazing. Thank you.
Maybe we can do questions with the picoteo and then just... We have 30 minutes left, I don't want to keep you sitting.
Yeah, totally. Agree.
Yeah?
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah.
Okay, so we're available nationally if you want to chat.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.